Thank you. It's a delight to be back here. I think it was about 10 years ago that I was here at this special place. And I just want to say amen to everything that Estelle just spoke about. I love her work. I loved her first book, Sacred Therapy, and I love her second book, The Wisdom of Not Knowing. In fact, she sent me an advanced copy of the manuscript, and I kept writing in the margins, Eckhart, Eckhart, Eckhart. There's so much echo about these realities when we move from our religious doctrines and dogmas and safety places into the level of experience. It is so shareable, and there are only so many archetypes and so many efforts at language about the deep things. And it's a pity that so much religion stays at the surface and does not take us into this arena of the mystical, which includes, of course, the not knowing. And the key to it is experience. Like the psalmist says, taste and see that God is good. You have to do the tasting. Tasting is not a vicarious experience. And we have to move beyond our language into places of commonality. Taste and see. And of course, taste is at the basis of the word Chochmat, wisdom, and also in Latin, the word sapientia, the word for wisdom, comes from the word for taste, sapere. So taste and wisdom go together, but it requires that we get out of our heads and into other modalities, other chakras, besides just our heads. So we're here today to talk about nothing and nothingness, ayin. Now, of course, this is a paradoxical statement, and I'm glad you all have a sense of humor and irony, because it is humorous that we gather to talk about nothing. Why talk about nothing? Well, why not? That's what's so wonderful about the human mind and imagination. We can even talk about nothing and have fun and learn in talking about nothing. What other creature would even consider talking about nothing? Now, as Estelle pointed out, listening to her clients, many people today are feeling deep feelings about nothing, about the direction our culture and our species is headed in, a direction of extinction, which is nothing. The extinction of much of what we cherish on this earth, not just our species, but so many other species that are going extinct at this time because of our species. Now, it's not easy to talk about nothing, but we do it more than we think. In physics today, we're being told that 95% of the matter of the universe is dark energy or dark matter, and we don't know what it is. We don't know if we'll ever know what it is. And of course, black holes. What do we know about all this? Well, that the cosmos is full of darkness, and so are our psyches. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century said, every human being is capable of the universe. Well, if we're capable of the universe, and the universe is filled with dark matter, dark energy, about which we know nothing, we're obviously bringing psyche and cosmos alive together at this time. We obviously have to swim in this ocean of not knowing. We experience darkness. We experience nothing in a deep way. And this can happen in many circumstances. It can happen in meditation. It can happen in suffering. It can happen in supreme loss and emptying. Yes, and it can happen in politics, which often contains suffering, supreme loss, emptying, especially today. Now, this is a universal experience. This is why Muslim mystics like Rumi and Jewish mystics of the Kabbalah but also the psalmist, Job, and others. And Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart, John of the Cross, the author of The Cloud of Unknowing, Mechtel de Magdeburg, all these mystics talk about nothing as an experience. Carol Christ, in her important book on feminist spirituality, she concludes the book by saying all these authors, a collection of different women authors, novelists, she says every one of them writes about nothing, the experience of nothingness. This is intrinsic. This is at the very heart of the women's experience of spirituality, she says. Another word for this is the dark night of the soul. And today we can talk about a collective dark night. I think our species is in a dark night of our species. Rabbi Heschel used to say that. Don't just talk about the dark night of the soul, but the dark night of society. And I go one step further, the dark night of our species. And clearly America is in a very special dark night at this time. And we face together the truths about climate change and the suffering of the planet and its creatures, and of course the power of denial. The power of denial, to pretend that nothing is not facing us in the face. We are indeed living in apocalyptic times. The news almost daily is apocalyptic. Are we here talking about nothingness and darkness? Are we mad? Rumi says, there is a secret medicine given only to those who hurt so hard they cannot hope. A secret medicine for those who hurt so hard they cannot hope. What about despair? The late Father B. Griffiths, a wonderful monk living in India, used to say that despair is a yoga. Many people do not experience spirit or God until they go through a deep experience of despair. Consider AA, for example, people who have taken that path of alcoholism or other addictions often have their first encounter of spirit after the bottoming out of despair. Rumi again, whoever is calm and sensible is insane. I could sign up for that. Whoever is calm and sensible is insane. Again, he says, where should I seek knowledge? In the abandonment of knowledge. That is the via negativa. That is the topic of this evening. But the mystical traditions also remind us that the dark night of the soul is very special. It is a special school where we learn things we do not learn every day from journalism, perhaps, or from the internet. Lessons about relationship, about what counts, about bottoming out, about emptying, about starting over, and yes, Estelle referred to this, about giving birth. Meister Eckhart said, he was 14th century, he was 13 when Rumi died. He was a contemporary of Hafiz and of the gathering of the Kabbalah, late 13th, early 14th century. Meister Eckhart said, I had a dream. Even though a man, I dreamt I was pregnant with nothingness. And out of this nothingness, God was born. That's a hell of a dream. And it's archetypal, of course. Out of the nothingness, God was born. The via negativa leads to the via creativa. Now God, the divinity itself, is an apophatic divinity as well as a cataphatic divinity. In other words, divinity can be talked about as light and all the wonderful elements of light, such as the rainbow that was referred to this evening. But the enlightenment has displaced the apophatic divinity. Our modern culture is not at home with understanding God as darkness. And part of that may be racism as well. That darkness carries a shadow implication to it for some. But here's Meister Eckhart. God is super essential darkness, who has no name and will never be given a name. And to me, that's an exact echo of what that rabbi who Estelle quoted said. When we give God's names, that's idolatry. It's projection. We love to project onto God, making God into our image instead of the other way around. It's more comfortable. We're more in charge that way. Says Thomas Aquinas, who preceded Eckhart. They were both Dominicans, as was I. Eckhart was 17 when Aquinas died. Aquinas says, we do not know who God is. We only know who God is not. I think a lot of today's atheism is actually rejection of the exclusive God of light. Many atheists have never heard about the apophatic divinity because many believers have never heard about the apophatic divinity. Here's Eckhart. The prophet said, you are truly a hidden God, Isaiah 45, who dwells on the ground of the soul, where the ground of God and the ground of the soul are one God. Being itself aims at darkness, for the final goal of being is the darkness or the unknowability of the hidden divinity, which is that light that shines, but the darkness had not comprehended it. What is the final end? It is a mystery of the darkness of the eternal Godhead. It is unknown, it was never known, and never will be known. God dwells therein unknown to the God self. And the light of the eternal Father has forever shone in there, and the darkness does not comprehend the light. So he goes on about how the deficiency lies in our language, he says. When the soul pronounces God, this utterance does not comprise the real truth of the divine essence. No one can truly say of what God is. Since God is transcendent being, therefore, God transcends all knowledge. The soul tastes God, where all naming has been set aside. There it knows God most purely. There it is fully godlike. When we speak of God, we have to stammer. So that recovery of the unnameability and unknowability of divinity is a very important moment to recover in our history as a species. And I do think the new physics assists us, because even the universe is far less knowable than we presume. Now, I think it's really important to name the context for our topic today. And for me, the great spiritual tradition names it very well. When we talk first about the via positiva, awe and wonder, just what Estelle was talking about, what Mary Oliver calls astonishment. She says there are only 3 lessons I've learned in life after 83 years, she said in a talk a year or two ago, I heard her. She said, first is pay attention. The second is be astonished. And the third is share your astonishment. That's what life's about. She said the rest is details. And I think astonishment, radical amazement, we're talking the same thing. Now, after the experience of awe and wonder and radical amazement comes the via negativa, our topic for tonight. But following that is the via creativa, our creativity. And following that is the via transformativa, the work of justice, the work of healing, the work of tikkun, healing the world. We must therefore put this talk about nothingness and emptiness in the context, because we're not here talking about nothingness to escape the struggles that our culture and species are facing today. No, we're here to deepen our contribution, to come to take this retasting of the depths of darkness and nothingness into giving birth to new institutions, to new forms of being human, to new forms of doing economics and politics and media and religion and worship. We experience darkness, silence, nothingness in a way that penetrates us, I think, at least three ways. Via meditation. Meditation certainly takes us into this place. Even this brief meditation we just had with Estelle, it takes us into a place of emptiness and of tasting what is beyond our selfhood. And I think awe in the Via Positiva is also a way into tasting nothingness. Because after awe, we go silent. This happened to Job, remember. He put his hand over his mouth when God said, "Where were you, Job?" When I created the goat and the lions who make love and all the rest of it. Finally, he shut up. He put his hand over his mouth and he shut up. That's the Via Negativa. That's silence. Awe reduces us to silence. It's beyond words. This is why we turn to music or to dance or to poetry to express that which most deeply touches us. And then, of course, suffering is a path into nothingness and silence again. The kind of suffering we are experiencing today, as Estelle said, in our cultural upheaval. Here are a few observations from Eckhart about unknown and uncertainty, apropos of our discussion today. He says, we become a pure nothing, experiencing pure ignorance, an unknown knowledge that is unencumbered and bare. This way into pure nothingness is a way into darkness, where there is emptiness and solitude. So, like any poet, he's struggling with language, of course, and metaphors to express the unexpressible. But we give him so much credit for doing that, because this was very important to him, that he devoted 14 whole sermons in my collection of his sermons on this topic of the Via Negativa. And his effort is so profound. And he points out, he says, this is in the scriptures. He alludes to Hosea. I'm going to lure her and lead her out into the wilderness. So the wilderness and the desert is an experience of nothing because you're cut off from your credit cards. And then Psalm 55, I say, oh, for wings of a dove to fly away and find rest. How far I would take my flight and make a new home in the desert and find a shelter, etc., etc. So Eckhart links this deep contemplative teaching to wisdom literature and the prophetic literature of the Hebrew Bible, or going out into the wilderness. He says the divine way of pure ignorance becomes our appetite, our potential for sensitivity. That's why we have to go into the dark night of the soul, to become more sensitive, more attuned. It's a purification. Not because we're bad and naughty, but because our capacities are so vast, yes, so cosmic, so divine-like, that we need to have our windshield clean from time to time. We have to clean our senses so that we can see more deeply. Here's just one passage that I think is very practical. He says, no cask can have two kinds of wine in it. If it is to contain wine, one must necessarily pour out the water. The cask must be bare and empty. Therefore, if you would receive divine joy in God, it is necessary for you to pour out the creatures. So this emptying precedes a filling. Mindfulness can only happen out of mind emptiness. And that is what the Via Negativa is about, or being emptied in order to be filled. He also talks about the eye. The eye is empty. therefore can see all things. Or just take the eye of a camera. If there's a smudge there, you don't get the picture. So we need that empty net cleansing to see more fully and more richly. Another sermon he says, I state as I have often stated, that this eternal birth of God in us is present, effective, and powerful in all things. God is only generative, however, in the soul. So divinity is busy birthing. Eckhart says, what does God do all day long? God lies on a maternity bed giving birth. So we too are that kind of being that we are busy birthing. Well, I'm told that I have very little time left. Eckhart says, God is nothing. God is nameless nothingness. God is nothing, but God is something. Nameless nothingness and changeless existence. And our intellects, too, are no thing, he says. That's why they can pick up everything. In this way, we are like God. This is part of being an image and likeness of God, that our intellects are so empty and so capable of emptiness that we want to return to that state of emptiness on a regular basis, precisely in order to be attuned to the divine music, the divine presence. So let me close my few words with a brief poem from Thomas Merton, the Catholic monk who was converted by Suzuki, the Japanese Buddhist who introduced him to Eckhart. And that was 18 years after Merton joined the monastery. He was finally converted. And he was converted by Eckhart. And here's just one poem from Merton. Fire, turn inward to your weak fort, to a burly infant spot, a house of nothing. O peace, bless this mad place. Silence, love the growth. O silence, golden zero, unsetting sun. Love winter when the plant says nothing. Love winter when the plant says nothing. Now for a little practice, I'm going to propose that we do a chant together. So I'm going to invite you to sit up straight, get the air going through your back, feet on the floor, and we only have time for one or two of these. Let's chant this name that Eckhart gives God, nameless nothingness. And let's see, by chanting it, it might take us into another place, okay? So you might want to close your eyes. You don't have to, but it might be good. Let's just go with this mantra, nameless nothingness. You can move your hands. I recommend moving your hands like wheels, like the wheels of the chariot in Ezekiel. Nameless nothingness, 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 quiet, nameless nothingness, nameless nothingness, nameless nothingness. Amen. Let's do one more quick mantra. Let's take that phrase from Merton's poem, Golden Zero. Golden Zero. Let's call on the Golden Zero. Let's work it over. I like to do mantras. I say Hindus should not have all the fun. You know, we should make up mantras from our own Western traditions, our own Western scriptures, mystics, and the rest. Mantras are powerful ways to get the right brain, the mystical brain, nurtured and healthy and well fed. And they're so cheap. They're so cheap. You can do them in the bathtub. You can do them on the metro quietly. Okay, let's do golden zero. It's a wonderful phrase. Don't know what it means, but that's the whole point, right? Let's ride it, see where it takes us, like an eagle. We're riding this eagle called golden zero. Ready? Golden zero, 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 zero. Amen.